The only time I've ever asked something that everybody talks at once. Usually it's crickets. All right? So try one at a time. Go ahead. What is it? Now nobody will talk. Here we go. Now we're back to normal. All right? Golden rule. Do unto others. Okay? All right? What else? What is it? Kindness. Okay, kindness. Yeah. 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 Honor. You do you. Service. Anything else? Sacrificial. Be sacrificial. Sacrifice. Okay. Kindness. Humility. All right. Anything else that you can think of? Integrity. There's a good one. There's a good one. Give that person a gold. At all of our opinions on what it takes to be a good person. So who has the best interpretation? I do. Yeah, right. I do, right? Yeah, exactly. All right? So if you came up with it, it's yours, right? So what does it take to be a good person? Well, the good news is Jesus gives us a pretty clear picture of what a good person is. He modeled it for us. He talked about it. So we're going to find ourselves tonight in Matthew chapter 5. This is part, we talked about the first part of the Sermon on the Mount last week. This is a next section. The Sermon on the Mount. Jesus starts with. As heinous as murder is, it's actually a symptom of a deeper issue. What's the issue? Well, that's where it comes from, the heart. Anger. All right? Anger and jealousy. Jesus demands that we deal with our anger. Otherwise, we will wind up doing exactly what he predicted. All right? Just as if I was to take one of your lives, obviously it ruins your life because you don't have it anymore, but it's going to ruin your loved ones' lives and those people that care about you as well, right? But I can ruin your life almost as dramatically by insult, by slander, by false accusation, by causing division in your life, can't I? All of those things. You've had people in your life that have done that to you. Or maybe you've done that to others. Or and so she shares this story. And here again, here's an MMA fighter that could just kick the living snot out of me. All right? I'm telling you, next to maybe my wife, Kathy, I don't know that I've met a sweeter soul just through this interview. She is the sweetest girl. I'm just like, wow. I can't believe you're an MMA fighter because, like, it just doesn't come across in her personality at all. And she talked about how she's actually an introvert and, and different things like that. But she talks about the hurt and the damage that the online community has caused her. She's out of work. She doesn't get hired for acting jobs and stuff like this because people slandered her, accused her of things that weren't true, and caused division. And just recently, Elon Musk's legal team is bringing a case against Disney and whoever else is all part of this and, trying to get her name restored. But imagine, she talks about how for 3 years it destroyed her life. Okay? Jesus said, you've heard it said, don't murder. But I say, see, sometimes murder might not be the worst thing in that it's one and done. But if you've ever been slandered, this happens every day in our culture. People's lives are ruined by what other people say about them. Jesus is trying to get his followers to see something. All right? How many lives, families, marriages, even businesses are destroyed by these things more than manslaughter? Wouldn't you say these things happen more often than manslaughter? Absolutely they do. So Jesus is addressing that. Okay? It begins in the heart. It's the issue is not I want to kill you. No, the issue is an issue of anger and jealousy. And so Jesus said, you got to get a handle on that. Yeah, you may never go and kill somebody. Chances are you won't. But you can destroy their life just as dramatically through slander, insults, accusations, and causing division. All right? And we all have those stories that we've seen. Whether they've happened to us personally or to a family member or a loved one, it happens every day, doesn't it? And Jesus said, listen, if you're going to follow me, all right, your righteousness needs to go by. See, the Pharisees weren't beyond that. They didn't kill people, but they slandered them. All right? let's go on to our next section, adultery. All right? Jesus said this. You have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. Again, referencing the Ten Commandments. But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. Now, obviously, Jesus is using hyperbole here, but he's making a big point. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Now, let me ask you a question. We obviously know what adultery is. It's breaking a marital contract. All right? It's cheating on your spouse. Causes unheard of damage. All right? That's external. But I can lust all day, and my wife will never find out about it. Right? Would you agree with me that today, 2024, we are living in a time of unprecedented sexual dysfunction? And Jesus is calling his followers to a higher level of purity. This has nothing to do with prudish Puritanism. All right? This has nothing to do with being old-fashioned. It's actually an issue of family health, mental health, human decency, and societal stability. Where has the sexual revolution of the 1960s brought us today? Are we better for it? It's caused untold of damage. It's destroyed marriages. It's destroyed families. It's destroyed men. It's destroyed women. I mean, I won't even get into the pornography statistics, but it's destroying lives. Jesus is saying, listen, yeah, it's wrong externally, but the heart of the matter is, if you're even, what's your motive? What's your motive that is driving when it comes to purity? All right? And every one of us deals with that. Not just men, but women too. And so while we may pat ourselves on the back, well, I've never cheated on my spouse, have we been as pure with our motives? And it just takes that one time, that one little glance, oh, look at that. All right? So Jesus is calling us to it, and then he says things like your right eye and your right hand, gouge it out, cut it off. His point is this: evaluate your life. If there are things in your life that you know are spiritually unhealthy for you, get rid of those things, even if you're enjoying them in the moment, because they may cause greater damage later on. All right? That's exactly right. In fact, I was just going to, when Hugh Hefner began the whole Playboy thing, all right, it was part of the sexual revolution, sexual liberation, all that. Hey, it's girls on the pages of a magazine, no big deal, right? What follows Playboy? Penthouse. What follows Penthouse? I don't even know. All right. Hustler. Thank you. All right. I'm not even going to ask how you know. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So, you have any other insight for us? No, it's. But every decade became more and more saturated and decadent with it. And now, do you know what one of the big issues in middle school is today? It's not pornography. That's been there for several years. What is it? Well, identity, for sure. Sexting's another big one. It's now AI where students are using AI to get their females, it's usually female, but sometimes probably male too, to draw them naked and then start passing those pictures around online. What does that do to the girl? That's where we're at in culture. We have Scandinavian countries trying to legalize pedophilia. All right? It's a heart issue. It's not an external. The external is the symptom. It's the heart issue. And Jesus is calling us to a higher standard. All right? Our righteousness has to go beyond. So Jesus said, listen, check your motive. Yeah, you may not be out committing adultery with someone else physically, but you can be mentally. Then he goes on to what follows next: divorce. He says this: it was also said, again, referencing the law of Moses, whoever divorces his wife must give her a written notice of divorce. Now, by Jesus' day, in the Jewish community, if you were a male, and this is Middle East, it's still like this. Excuse me. You could divorce your wife for any reason. Okay? Like, and by the way, ladies, you couldn't divorce your husbands. That's just the way it was back then. But you could divorce your wife literally for any reason. All right? You came home, supper wasn't ready. You could give her a certificate of divorce. In that culture, there was no government protection or any way for that woman to provide for herself. So if you were either A, young and had no children, or B, old, you were in a lot of trouble. The young women usually ended up going into the sex trafficking because that was the best way to make money, and the old women eventually starved to death. So Jesus knows how bad divorce was in his time. And he says this, but I tell you, everyone who divorces his wife, except in the case of sexual immorality, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, I had always been taught and always interpreted this, all right, as just kind of as it's written here, all right? Well, I'm committing adultery if I would marry a divorced person, or if I divorce, I'm committing adultery, kind of thing. And then I started reading some commentary and things like that, and it painted a broader picture. Think about it this way. Would you agree, and don't raise your hands, but I'm pretty sure we've got divorced people in this room. All right, just statistically, it's all over the place. Would you agree, okay, again, don't raise your hand, nod, anything like that. You don't have to do that. But would you agree that divorce causes just as much damage to a person and person's lives and livelihood and exploitation of them that adultery does? I would dare say it does. More like murder? How so? It destroys life. Yeah. 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 All right. Both are different, but they have the exact same effects. Think of it this way. In the cases of divorce, now, our modern laws here in America have made this a little bit different, but if you even go back into history, even 100 years ago, you would find this to be true. In both cases of adultery and divorce, there's a loss of economic security, isn't there? Right? No husband means you got to fend for yourself. There is a sense of ostracization, all right? I cannot begin to tell you the number of men or women that have been divorced through the years in ministry that are ostracized not only from their exes, but their children as well. In some cases, their grandchildren. It's got far-reaching effect. All right? It causes women to become vulnerable to predatory males. All right? So the focus is not on causing someone to sin. That's not what Jesus is necessarily saying. It's teaching how the consequences of divorce for any reason forces the spouse into the same dangerous waters as sexual malpractice. And like Angie says, it just destroys relationships. All right? And so Jesus says, listen, if you do these things, it's going to hurt you and it's going to hurt people that you say you love and that you care about, or they care about you. And people that are trying to follow God, they don't do those kind of things. Now, I know we live in a day and age where divorce is prevalent, at least 50%. But again, it was that way in Jesus' day too. The male, literally, and it wasn't like today where it costs somebody something. You know, like in Florida here, I think it's what, 50-50? All right? I'm too cheap, so I'll never get divorced. All right? I'm just too cheap. I don't want to pay for it. But I think it's 50-50 from what people have said. But think of it this way. They didn't have to pay near that. If the man wanted to leave his wife, he left. She had no recourse. That was it. There was no legal wrangling or anything like that. That was it. She was done. She was out of the house. She was on the street. She then had to fend for herself. And it wasn't a culture like we have today, ladies, where you can go get a job or you can go to school or, you know, again, not saying it's easy. It's not. It's this difficult period. But in the first century, it was that much more difficult. And Jesus is like, this isn't what followers of mine do. Now, let's go to another issue Jesus raises. Verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to our ancestors, you must not break your oath, but you must keep your oaths to the Lord. But I tell you, don't take an oath at all, either by heaven, because it is God's throne, or by the earth, because it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, because it is the city of the great king. Do not swear by your head, because you cannot make a single hair white or black. But let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no, and anything more than this is from the evil one. An oath is an attempt to differentiate situations that require honesty from those that are not honest. Do you realize that any time you sign a contract, you're signing that contract because it is assumed you're a dishonest person? Now, Tammy, I know you were in the construction business. How many times did you see contracts come and go and be broken and things like that? All right? Plenty, I'm sure. But think about it this way. You sign a bank loan. They are assuming that you're going to break that loan. That's why it's such a heavy penalty if you do. Jesus said, listen, this is not how my followers act. Our trouble is we experience broken promises every day, don't we? Every day. Every day. I don't know why everybody gets all caught up in politics, either side. Both sides lie all the time, and they're not going to do half the stuff they talk about anyway. If you just come to grips with that reality, you're going to be a happier person, I promise you. You just are. All right? But sometimes there's penalties, sometimes not. Jesus' point is mean what you say and say what you mean. In Jesus' day, All right? People would swear by heaven and God's throne. Okay? Well, that was a very intangible oath because no one had ever seen God or his throne. So they're just kind of, it'd be like us saying, I swear to God. Well, how many people have you known say, I swear to God, and they were lying through their teeth? Right? But that's what that means. Or Jerusalem, or the temple. All right? There's a little bit more binding because there's that physical kind of thing. But the point Jesus is making is, listen, you shouldn't have to make an oath. If you want to go deeper relationally, if you want to go deeper righteously, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And guess what? Jesus' own brother James jumped all over that in his letter, James chapter 5. He says, above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear either by heaven or earth or with any other oath. Now he's talking to Jesus followers. But let your yes mean yes and your no mean no so that you won't fall under judgment. Gee, I wonder where he heard that from. Oh yeah, probably his brother. So Jesus is saying, listen, you want to go deeper? The heart of the matter is, you be a person of integrity. Now he comes to another difficult teaching. All right? Go on the second mile. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So that was kind of the Old Testament law of Moses. All right? If you wronged somebody, you stole their cattle, then you owed them a cattle kind of thing. All right? But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. As for the one who wants to sue you and take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. Now think about this logically. The shirt is where? Up against the body, right? So I lose my shirt, but I still have my cloak on. At least I'm still covered. You take the cloak, now what am I? I'm naked. I'm exposed. Right? And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, this is very common Roman practice. They would have, part of their law was they could cause, one of their subjects to carry their stuff for 1 mile. And Jesus said, go with them too. Give to the one who asks, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Jesus pointed out that, listen, by going that extra mile, by turning the cheek, offering the other cheek, and they take advantage of that, by taking that mile and going the extra mile, by taking your shirt and giving the cloak, you are showing a person's true intent. Because if I say, hey, listen, Sherry, I want you to carry this for 1 mile. And you're like, oh, hey, listen, Todd, I'll carry it 2 miles. No, Sherry, that's not necessary. I just need the mile. But a Roman wouldn't do that. He would do what? He'd be like, great, that's one less person I have to find. Does that show a true intent? Yeah. Do you know who was really effective in modern times of using this strategy? 2 people. Gandhi, all right, using nonviolent resistance, and MLK. And by doing the things that they did, they exposed the motives of the people that were against them and just laid out to bear. And Jesus said, listen, you will expose evil for what it is when you open yourself up this way. And its true motives will be seen. So Jesus isn't just saying, yeah, go the extra mile because that's just the loving thing to do, but that is part of it. But it exposes people's true motives. And that happens long enough, guess what? All of a sudden, society starts to push back on that, don't they? Okay? Is there a law out there today that exists that says you have to carry somebody's stuff for 1 mile? Nope. Do you know why? Because it was unfair and that practice got tossed. Is there unfair stuff in our society that gets exposed, and because it's exposed, now all of a sudden, maybe that wasn't a good idea. All right? So that's what Jesus is saying there. And then finally, we get to this one. Love your enemies. You have heard it was said, love your neighbor. So part of the Mosaic law, what God was trying to teach the Jewish people is, listen, when a foreigner comes through the land, don't mistreat him. Remember, you were foreigners in Egypt, and when you came into the land of Canaan, you were foreigners until God gave you the land. So remember, be kind, be loving towards your neighbor, and hate your enemy. So you've heard it said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. That was the old Jewish proverb. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. That phrase, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven, we might say it this way. Like father, like what? Son. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now listen to what he says. For he, God, causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. What does that say? The God indiscriminately blesses both people that are for him and against him. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? In other words, that's not difficult. That's easy to do, right? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And it's interesting that Jesus throws that in because they were literally the worst of the worst. Like, you were better off being a prostitute than a tax collector in Jewish culture. All right? You would have had you would have a little more respect and reputation as a prostitute than a tax collector. Jesus said, hey, listen, even tax collectors, all right, maybe today we would say even drug dealers know how to treat the people that treat them well, right? So Jesus said, don't pat yourself on the back for that. Anybody can do that. And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what are you doing that's out of the ordinary? Don't even the Gentiles do the same? In other words, this is kind of a human principle. So this is a perfect example of reflecting the character and the nature of God. And it's a reminder, when Jesus is on the cross, before he utters his final words at his finish, what does he say? He looks down at his accusers and everyone there cheering on his death and says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And he says to us who are following him, love your enemies. Like father, like son. Apple, tree. And then he closes with this. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Well, we're all doomed. We're all in trouble. Well, no, not actually. This verse is not a call to moral perfection. Thank goodness, because we're not going to reach that. The Greek there, the word, indicates mature and holistic. Jesus is in essence saying this. Keep growing so that you can be more like your Father. And for Jesus, unconditional love is that heart of morality. And sometimes we're tempted to push back on that truth. But that's where we have to remember Jesus' model prayer when he was placed on the cross. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Now, let me close with this, because this is very hard. But thank goodness, God did not just drop this on us and expect us to do this on our own, because we can't. He gave us two things. He gave us his Holy Spirit, him living inside of us, and he gave us his word to guide us. Using those two things, a believer can become perfect. Now, again, not morally perfect, not going to happen this side of heaven, but complete and holistic, because that's what Jesus is trying to say. Jesus wants us to grow up. That's why Jim, almost every week, you hear him say, help us to grow up in our faith, not old in our faith. It's very easy to grow old in our faith. It's easy to start going to church when you're little, and you just kind of stick with it. Maybe you walk away for a while, and you come back, and here you are. But there are a lot of people that don't know any more about God at age 80 than they did at age 8, because they have not grown up in the faith. They just simply grew old in it. Jesus is calling us to a much different life. So, I encourage us to take him up on that. All right? Any thoughts, comments, questions? Yep, thank you. All right. Toughest night yet. Most challenging night yet. Good. Go home. Yeah. Uh-huh. 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 Yeah. 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 Good. Good. Well, keep chewing on it.